Hello, friends. We are continuing with telepathy and the etheric vehicle. This is the 25th of October here, and for you it is the 24th, or for many of you anyway, it is the 24th. And we are on page 25, and DK is telling us about the origin of certain states which we recognize as familiar. So just to review with a little segue, what is mass psychology, he says, with its unreasoning quality and its blind activity, but a massed reaction to solar plexus impressions as passed from group to group. So he's translating commonly found states into their origin, or at least, or maybe we consider it the other way. What is public opinion, so-called, but vague mental reactions by the mass of men beginning to grope their way onto the mental plane, to mass reaction to the activity and play of more active and powerful minds. He goes on, the written and spoken word are not in themselves adequate to account for the display of modern opinion as we now have it. What is the apparently accurate information so rapidly circulated among the savage races, as it was called in those days? Maybe today it would not be called that. But rapidly circulated among the savage races, but an expression of that instinctual telepathy, which uses the vital body and the pranic fluids as its medium, where we have really all three levels of the personality listed here. Kind of a solar reaction to in the solar plexus, reaction, however vague, in the mind, and also reaction in the etheric body, which makes its way onto the physical plane. So our task is to take the higher impressions and to see how they translate into lower activities of the personality, which are commonly recognized. So that is the end of number 10. And yeah. And that, I suppose, took place on the 24th of October. And it went from 22 to 25. And now we begin with program 11, the telepathy and the etheric vehicle, from 24th in some places, especially at this time in the United States and the far west, and to a certain extent, maybe South America. And we're working forward from page 25. I think it's important that we get the idea that DK is both occasionally repeating himself and not repeating himself. So there are always new pieces of information which help us understand how the telepathic purpose or telepathic process is working. Okay. So now, going on from the dates 24, 25, and from page 25, we deal with 3 types of energy which are involved. And I don't think we necessarily finished that this evening, but I was looking forward to being able to do another program today, and maybe the idea is presenting itself. So, the 3 types of energy involved. He seems already to have dealt with 3. Shambhala energy, remote, hierarchical energy, and the energies of intelligence. So we're trying to develop telepathy among group members and group response to higher influencing sources, such as the Master, such as the Christ, or the Buddha, such as, eventually, the Lord of the world. Telepathic interrelation between the members of a group grows through the medium of a constant attitude of reflective thought. And steadfast love for each other. So we are always here the observer. And when the heart center of the group members is active, we will also have that steadfast love for each other. This is something which cannot be faked in some way. It is there or it is not there. And you will know whether you have a critical mind which interferes with the steadfast love for each other. Just test yourself for a moment, and no doubt you are in groups or potentially within the reach of groups. What is the story? Okay. I would remind you, he says, that when I use these terms, I am referring to two major types of energy in the world today. I don't think he is referring yet to the monadic will. Essentially, the Tibetan goes on, energy is active substance. These two types of force are of a vitality, potency, and substance so subtle and fine that they can work through and force into activity pranic fluids, which constitute the substance of the etheric body, to which I referred in a much earlier instruction. And he takes us to a treatise on white magic, where he elaborates the subject. Okay. Now, what are these two types? He gives us an asterisk, which can take us to the right place in a treatise on cosmic fire. He goes on. The telepathic work, therefore, is concerned with three types of energy, which demonstrate as forces with the power to motivate. Okay. I think he's talking about the higher and the subtler ethers and their reality. Now, this is a reality which concrete-minded thinkers readily dismiss. It's not within their universe of possibility. But it all will be proven. Yes, it all will be verified. We can have that much faith in what the Master has already conveyed to us, that he is not conveying some kind of falsehood at this time. Okay, so what are these three types of energy? We seem to have already referred to some kind of threefoldness, but okay. Several kinds: love, mind, and prana. Well, I think we can see all of these within the personality. So let's begin with what the Tibetan has to say. The force of love. The force of love. The force of love, with its, well, why does he call it a negative quality? Let's see if we can determine why that term is used. So, point A, it attracts the needed material with which to clothe the idea or thought or concept to be transmitted. It is also the attractive agency used by the recipient when the recipient is going to be working on the outer plane. So, point A, it attracts the needed material, says the Tibetan, with which to clothe the idea, give it some degree of vitality and attractiveness in its own right. So to clothe the idea, the thought, the concept to be transmitted. And it is also the attractive agency utilized by the recipient as he attempts to reach within his range of possibilities the outer plane. So DK goes on, therefore both the transmitter and recipient work with the same agency, but, and this appears to be an important point, but the transmitter uses the love energy of the larger whole, whilst the recipient concentrates upon the transmitter the love energy of his own nature. So there's an interplay between transmitter and recipient. If this be so, says the Tibetan, you can see why I emphasize the necessity for love and non-criticism. So there is a productive interplay between the greater transmitter and one who will become a useful transmitter once certain relationships with the original transmitter are accomplished. Now, what else? We're talking about the force of love with its negative quality. And also, this energy of love, this force of love, constitutes the coherent quality the law of cohesion and the coherence that love can bring. It constitutes the coherent quality which links together the transmitter and the recipient, and which also produces the coherency of that which is transmitted. We don't want to transmit that which is disjointed. And so often that is the case. There are many quite vague thought forms in the area of the recipient's mind, and they must be made to cohere before they're going to be of any use to anyone. So DK goes on in saying, page 26, it will be apparent to you consequently that it is only at this time that we can begin to look for a wider and more general expression in the world today of the process of telepathy. For only today is the love principle really beginning to affect the world on a large scale. Now, long ago, the Christ functioning in relation to the third advanced meditative formula presented attributes came forth with love as his presented attribute. And maybe some degree of wisdom, though the Buddha presented the attribute of wisdom, light wisdom, and that would be for the Buddha, and love and light for the Christ's presented attributes. Now, in terms of these attributes being more widely understood and expressed, light wisdom is more widely understood and expressed than love and light together. Now, these are Aryan times, and he tells us that only today is the love principle really beginning to affect the world on a large scale. We have great difficulties in the world, and we have those who are searching principally for power, no matter how they violate the principle of love. And we see this occurring. We see people who care only for themselves, for the symbolism of money and for the hoarding of that symbol, because it brings them that which they desire. So how is this love working out now, at this time? Love of a cause, says the Tibetan, a party, or an idea, is becoming more and more prevalent, producing in the initial stages the apparently wide cleavages with which we are so familiar, and I might add, these days increasingly familiar, and by which we are so distressed at this time, yet producing finally a dominance of the attitudes of love, which will heal breaches and produce synthesis among peoples. Well, there's quite a bit on as an American, I don't think America has ever been more widely split, except during the sort of prototype of the present cleavages, the Civil War, and humanity itself is becoming widely split. So when the Christ says, I come to bring not peace, but the sword, he is going to bring the sword of discrimination so that we can see the origin of these cleavages, which the fifth ray used negatively and the first in combination with the seventh can produce. Okay, now here's another one of those great statements. Love, not sentiment, and he defines sentiment in the rays and the initiations in chapter 11 as the liking and disliking of each other. Love, not sentiment, is the clue to successful telepathic work. Ponder that. Therefore, love one another with fresh enthusiasm and devotion, the sixth ray related to the second. It's as if you can do this if you will to do it. Seek to express that love in every possible way, upon the physical plane, upon the levels of emotion, and through right thought. Let the love of the soul sweep through all like a regenerating force. This is, I think, wouldn't you agree, so I'll put this in our indigo color, and we can practice this love. We can practice it, and we can ask ourselves whether we are successful in accomplishing some degree of this love. Love, not sentiment, the liking and disliking of each other, which has to be dispensed with before the real work in Rule 11 can be accomplished. Rule 11 in the rays and initiations, it is the clue to successful telepathic work. Well, we cannot skip over that. This is the clue to successful spiritual work, and we need to have this clue in mind. Sometimes we might think, well, if I concentrate my mind strongly enough, if I become a truly impressive agent, if I become quite sensitive to impression, telepathic work will be successful. But in fact, this is another of those golden sentences. Love, not sentiment, is the clue to successful spiritual work. And therefore the injunction, well within our control, love one another. That's what the Christ said, the 11th Commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. What must the disciples have thought when he said that? Because they had been raised on the 10 Commandments, which were mostly of the thou shalt not variety. Therefore, love one another, the Tibetan conveys to us, with a fresh enthusiasm and devotion. Once, of course, we realize its efficacy and seek to express that love in every possible way, upon the physical plane, upon the levels of emotion, and through right thought. Let the love of the soul sweep through all like a have we thought what it would be like to carry out this 11th commandment? What we would have to eliminate to love one another with fresh enthusiasm. What would it be like? Have we attempted it? Or are we so preoccupied that we have not been able to do so? So, the very first of the 3 types of energy, the force of love, with its negative quality, perhaps he means attractive quality rather than assertive quality. Now, what's the second one of the 3 energies? The force of mind. Okay. The force of mind. Of course, it's not enough, but it has definitely has its place. This is the illuminating energy which lights the way of an idea or form to be transmitted and received. Okay, that's what he means by the force of mind. Forget not that light is subtle substance. Upon a beam of light can the energy of the mind materialize. And he tells us that this is really an important statement. Upon a beam of light can the energy of the mind materialize? Whoop. That beam of light, of course, has to affect the etheric body. So DK does so much of this lighting the way. And we are asked to not forget that light is subtle substance. And I think I want to enlarge that point of view. Upon a beam of light, says the Tibetan, can the energy of the mind materialize. It looks like this is some of the methodology of magic, how things are made to appear or disappear. I'm reminded of a couple of instances in the movie Fanny and Alexander, which portrayed the childhood of the Swedish director, film director, Ingmar Bergman. His grandfather was an old Kabbalist and projected light images of his grandchildren so that the minister who had married their mother would be confused. He said, "Don't touch them," because there was nothing substantial there. Let's see if there's something else. Well, that was one important example. Yes, it was in the realm of art, but who is to say that it did not occur? And in the same way, yes, Apollonius of Tyana disappeared from the midst of the court when they were aroused to attack him because of what he had said. And we realized that the same was true of Tibetan monks when they were assailed by the Chinese communist invaders of Tibet. They just disappeared in front of the eyes of these attackers. It all has to do with the control of image by light. So upon a beam of light, can the energy of mind materialize? And this is one of the most important statements in relation to the connection with the science of telepathy. Of course, we have to learn how to do this and when it is appropriate to do this. This is an arresting comment, one of the most important statements made in connection with the science of telepathy. Notice he does call it a science. He's not calling it the art of telepathy, but oftentimes an art is an intuitive use of what the science has produced. Okay, let's go on a little more. You know, these are late hours for me, but one has to function when one can. So anyway, DK says, the success of this is dependent upon the alignment of the bodies of the transmitter and the recipient. The double line of contact must be that of mental energy and brain electricity, the magnetic power of love to attract attention, to produce alignment, and to call forth rapport and understanding is not all that is necessary in the new telepathy, which will distinguish the new age. There must also be mental development and mental control. So we certainly are learning about the qualifications for the newer and truer form of telepathy. And this is the statement about love, vitally necessary, but not sufficient unto itself. Uh-huh. Okay. Love and mind. When dealing with those two, naturally the presence of Venus, the abilities of Venus being the planet of both love and mind, are considered or is considered necessary. Okay, Now, the form of telepathy, says the Tibetan, is not a function of the animal soul, let us call it animal consciousness, as in the case of solar plexus contact and response to messages by the emotionally polarized man or woman. There is a distinction here. There is a function of the animal soul, but not the kind of telepathy that we are talking about, this alignment of soul, mind, and brain. Going on, this telepathic rapport and response is a characteristic of the human soul and is working from mind to mind and brain to brain. So at the very least, one has to be an individualized human soul in order to partake of the method of the newer and more effective forms of telepathy. Soul, mind, brain, really. That's what we see here. The human soul working from mind to mind and brain to brain. This is the way of really accomplishing something for the divine plan. This type of more advanced alignment is literally a state of consciousness which is sufficiently conditioned by the integrated mental person so that he is aware of and inclusive of the mental state and thought processes of another. And maybe that still lies ahead of us. So, thus far, in terms of the three forms of energy, we have the force of love with its negative ingathering quality, the force of mind, and how it can be used by the soul. And we also have the energy of prana, or etheric force of the vital body. This has to be also engaged. Okay. And I think I'll put the color violet there. Now, this energy, by an act of the will, and under the pressure of the magnetic power of love, responds to or is receptive to the dual energies mentioned above. The energy of love and the energy of mind, by an act of the will and because of the pressure of the magnetic power of love, responds to or is receptive to the dual energies mentioned above. It is, in a way, the third energy. Yeah. Okay. The idea, thought form, or mental impression, which must be recorded in the brain consciousness of the recipient, opens a way in the pranic fluids, and so controls their activity, which is as ceaseless as the thought form making propensities of the chitta. That the brain becomes responsive in two ways. Okay. Okay. Not doing too well here, but let's see if I can. I don't like to waste this time looking for proper colors. Um, Okay, so this is the energy of prana, very active and working out into the physical brain. So the ether is rendered passive by the impact of three types of energy blended and fused into one stream of force. Soul, mind, and the astral nature. That's number one. Number two, B, it becomes actively responsive to the idea, impression, thought form, symbol, word, etc., words, which are being swept into the area of its conscious activity. Okay, we might call this the activation of the ethers. And DK will use an example which should be helpful to us. Let me attempt to reduce the above information, he says, to practical simplicity, thus showing how these three types of energy can be used in practical work. I guess we always have to look forward to these concrete examples because they do give us a way of proceeding that is not overly complex. So, what have we here? Looks like love, mental energy, and the etheric ajna center. These would give us the practical method. I'm not sure that I will be able to reach this point tonight about the growth of telepathic rapport. But let's see. So, three types of energy blended and fused into one stream of force. And the etheric body is becoming highly responsive to that impression. So, the very first is by the use of the energy of love in three ways. And number one, by sending out love, not sentiment, i.e., not liking and disliking, by sending out love, not sentiment, to your brothers at the time of transmission or reception. So immediately we see what kind of discrimination is needed between sentiment and true love. Point B, by capitalizing upon the inherent power of love to attract the material or substance, and thus to clothe in the occult sense, that which you send out. Mm. So the first one is called sending out love. Now, if we haven't had that kind of experience, we have to enter into it and cultivate the experience. And also by realizing that there is in the power to love also the power to attract material or the substance, to clothe in the occult sense that which has been sent out. I suppose we might say rendering it attractive. Okay. To clothe. And number 3, by sending forth the clothed idea, impression, etc., on a stream of love which your brother, alert, receptive, and waiting, will attract to himself by the means of his conscious love for you. Okay. And I'm going to emphasize this last little bit. It's really so much about communication and the different modes of effective communication. So we've been looking at how the 3 energies work in a practical sense. Okay. Now, what else can we do? By the use of mental energy, through the effort to polarize yourself or fixate yourself upon mental levels of consciousness. Okay, this seems fairly straightforward. First, the love. then the mental focusing. And he tells us how to do it. He goes on, by a definite act of the will, which can be looked at as intensive concentration, you, says the Tibetan, you lift your consciousness onto the mental plane and hold it there. The action is a reflection upon a lower plane and in the brain consciousness of the mind's ability to hold itself in the light. So that is the second thing we do. And then he tells us, by a definite act of the will, you lift your consciousness onto the mental plane and hold it there. And this action, he says, is a reflection upon a lower plane and in the brain consciousness of the mind's ability to hold itself in the light. Now, all of this, obviously, it has to be practiced. We can't just be satisfied to hear some words by DK, to memorize those words, to know what is to be done, and then not do it. Further now, the success of all telepathic work you do, as a group or as individuals, will be dependent upon your capacity to hold yourself steady in the light. Hold yourself steady in the light, mentally steady. The difference, DK says, is that this time you do it for the purpose of the planned work and attempt to hold the mind steady in the light of the group or in each other's light, and not so specifically in the light of your own soul. It is, shall we say, a group process. And in the future, there will be many groups working from a higher perspective with lesser groups. Already this is being done with esoteric healing. So love is necessary, and mental focus. Now, what else? The third factor. By the conscious, organized use of the energy of the etheric ajna center, and sometimes of the head center when receiving, and the throat center when transmitting. This swings etheric force into activity when engaged in telepathic work, but entails its subordination to the power of the other two energies. See, here's an example of some very detailed teaching to be practiced so that it can be incorporated into our modus operandi. What does this do? It swings etheric force into activity, and let's hope that, yes, apparently I'm in the right place. But entails its conscious subordination to the power of the other two energies, love and mind. Okay. Now, from the practical perspective, practically, you will observe that this involves, on the part of the disciple, the power to do what? To do three things at once. And I must say that in the work of training for occultism, we frequently find the demand not to do one thing or another entirely separately, but rather simultaneously. Love, mind, and this etheric aspect of the ajna center, which seems to me to be a projecting center. Okay. Now going on with DK, this, you need to ponder more deeply upon the fact and necessity of active outgoing energy when you are occupied with the task of transmission and with active receptivity when you are functioning as a receiver. It's pretty clear that we are both receivers and transmitters simultaneously. And I think maybe this is the way that the masters accomplish so much, this ability to function in various ways with simultaneity. But how much there is to ponder and to enact. Our concentration has to be intense in either case, whether we are actively receptive and functioning en rapport with the sender, or whether we are transmitting somehow to the outer plane, in which case we're dealing here with the brain. I would like to point out, DK says, that successful telepathic work is dependent upon the following factors. You know, we could make a little compilation from all of this material, which is basically showing us upon what attitudes and actions successful telepathic work can be accomplished. Because he does repeat a number of these keys to success. He's also suggesting that success is not an instantaneous achievement. So in a way, we are certainly receiving some preliminary instruction, and it is up to us to make it experiential, inperiential, in our consciousness, in our process. First, another few of these statements about successful telepathic work. I'd like to be able to finish this. I just don't know if I have the stamina. Well, first of all, successful telepathic work, there can be no barriers. First, says the Tibetan, that there are no barriers existing between the receiver and the broadcaster. Such barriers would be lack of love or sympathy, criticism, and suspicion. So Ray 2, love or sympathy, Ray 3, criticism, and Ray 1, suspicion. So that is important. If the telepathic work is not to be thwarted. And we can tell right now if, as we think about our relationships in our groups, whether any of these conditions exist. And if they do, we have to again seize the moment and with fresh enthusiasm cultivate the love, spread the love. So the next one is, secondly, that the broadcaster is mainly occupied with the clarity of his symbol, with the word or thought, and not with the receiver. This would be a distraction if the attempt to get through to the receiver were paramount. A quick glance towards the receiver, a momentary sending forth of love and understanding is sufficient to set up the rapport, and then attention must be paid to the clarity of the symbol. Well, maybe we wouldn't expect this particular type of requirement, but okay, here it is. The the third thing that has to be accomplished for successful telepathic work. Thirdly, let the receivers think with love and affection of the broadcaster for a minute or two, and then let them forget the personality. A thread of energy linking receiver and broadcaster has been established and exists. So, and then forget it. Now, this is all very practical regarding how we are to achieve successful telepathic work, and hopefully we can remember these steps and actually employ them. Then forget it. That's an important and maybe unexpected piece of instruction. Now, for continuing for successful telepathic work, let the receivers work with detachment. Looks like this is a little bit difficult to do. And here's why. It says the Tibetan, most receivers are so anxious to receive correctly that through their very intensity, they counteract their own efforts. Now, maybe you have some experience with telepathic work. Is this the case? Has it been the case for you? I think my brief efforts at this almost some 40 years ago showed that I was too intent on the receiver and on receiving what had been sent. And now something very important that seems to be repeated constantly with regard to effective telepathic work, a casual and don't care spirit and a close attentiveness to the inner picturing faculty will net better results than any violent and strong effort to see the symbol and to contact the mind of the sender. This is repeated frequently by the Tibetan. It seems not the first time. The divine indifference attitude, a casual and certain don't care spirit, and a close attentiveness to the inner picturing faculty. Now, of course, we have to get used to that. See, I'm just seeing that in group work, there are many subtleties involved, or maybe also subjectivities, and we just have to cultivate them over time. Though, as Alice Bailey used to say, though sitting lightly in the saddle, so you're not always disturbed by the impact of hitting the saddle, obviously. Going on, I think we will, after all, be able to make this. The brain should register a reflection of the mind content, says the Tibetan. If a ray of light is met by an outgoing force from the receiver's mind or a powerfully emitted thought form, it can be prevented from reaching the mind. I guess this is fairly obvious, but until we begin to work with it, Um, it's just words. So if a ray of light sent by the communicator is met by an outgoing force from the receiver's mind or a powerfully emitted thought form, it can be prevented. That ray of light can be prevented from reaching the mind. Fairly obvious, I think. Now, we come to the question, how can we be alert to the sending and at the same time not so preoccupied with the sending that we thwart the impression from reaching us? But DK goes on and says, however, a transmitter with more expert training can overcome this barrier. And obviously, that's what Master DK is to us, the transmitter. How he overcomes it, maybe we don't know, but he has so much training himself that he can overcome it. Much of the trouble will be found to be based on the emitted thought forms, or in the rush of ill-regulated mental energy or brain radiation, which negates effort. So he knows the obstacles, and we have to be aware of them. He says emitted thought forms, emitted, which is the result, I think, of the impression or the effect or the response to the impression. It's not a deliberate transmission. Notice the word rush. It is not what we would hope to engage in. Rules of the road, there is no rush, no hurry, he says, and yet no time to lose. So we can go back to those rules of the road and find much that would be of value. Therefore, and he seems to summarize here, a quiet spirit and well-regulated thoughts will aid much, and the cultivation of that dispassion, that's that certain don't care attitude, right? And the cultivation of that dispassion, which desires nothing for the separated self and nothing violently. Well, obviously, we have to get used to such an attitude. The quiet spirit because maybe the kind of telepathy we're looking for takes place in the quiet, an avoidance of violent thoughts, a certain don't care attitude, a spiritual don't care attitude, which is overcoming the lower egotism because it desires nothing for the separated self and nothing violently. It seems that violence is always working against true reception. So here is a little summary of all we've said. Well, not all, but a summary, a kind of charge to us, if you will, a kind of encouragement. The need of sensitive receivers is great. Train yourselves. Forget yourselves and your own petty little affairs, so petty and unimportant when viewed in relation to the momentous issues of the present time. Keep an attentive ear to the voices which issue forth from the world of spiritual being, and love each other with loyalty and steadfastness. Well, there you have it again. There you have something of real importance. It's yes, it's an injunction is what it is. It's a charge. It's a statement of necessities. This we are to do. And we could collect such statements as this, which are injunctions, telling us truly what is necessary if we want to engage in successful telepathic interplay and transmission still further to help others. It's so, I just have to read it again, because it's from the Tibetan an injunction which, in a way, sums up the achievement of success in this whole process. The need of sensitive receivers is great. Train yourselves. Right there, the seventh ray will come into action. Forget yourselves, your little selves, right? And your own petty little affairs, so petty and unimportant when viewed in relation to the momentous issues of the present time. And even then, well, the Second World War was looming, and the danger of it was very clear to the masters, such as the Tibetan. Going on with this injunction, keep an attentive ear to the voices which issue forth from the world of spiritual being. And may I add, did not Alice Bailey do that once she realized what she was engaged in? Keep an attentive ear to the voices which issue forth from the world of spiritual being, and love each other with loyalty and steadfastness. That is, fulfill the 11th Commandment. Sometimes, I look at all the instructions and I wonder how these can be fulfilled. But one success will lead to another. And practice will bring a kind of growing perfection in the process. And before long, we will forget that we could not do these things because we will be doing them. Well, friends, that will be it for this evening. I'll send this to be posted on Makara and on YouTube. And before long, when I have quite a number of hours before me, when will that be? I will send the audio transcripts to the people who were requesting them. So Tuya and I and all our work along these lines, and all the members of the communications team, BL and Joe and Mikhail and Michael Stacy and others at different times, we send you our well wishes for understanding, reception, and successful application, so that the outer plane too may be affected in a way that will contribute to the manifestation of the divine plan. Okay, I guess our next work, we're going to talk about the growth of telepathic rapport. We did reach page 31 somehow. So from 25 to 31. So here is our prognosis. I probably have gone too far to say that this will definitely begin on the 24th, 25th. I don't know when it will begin again. Maybe tomorrow. And we will begin on page 31 with program 12. Up to this point, we have finished program 11 with all its liabilities and challenges for understanding the Tibetan, and we began at 25 and went as far as 31. So next time we will see what we're able to do. I'm on some kind of schedule here, which is a very late schedule. And maybe it would be better to find some more normal way to bring these things to you. But although I say I bring them to you, I'm well aware that it's up to you to make good use of what the Tibetan has said, and some of the light and the connections which I may be able to convey. I cannot really promise anything along that line. It just is, if something strikes you as useful, then okay. It will be useful, it will rise up as a hint, and you will be practicing until you can fulfill this last wonderful injunction by the Tibetan. So, for the moment then, many love, much love, and many blessings. Getting a little, okay. And we will be seeing you before long. Meanwhile, we have a couple of days of maybe only this, if I succeed, and then on Wednesday we will start having the triangles work again and some of the other programs. So, bye for now.